He lost everything, but found himself. Life-changing motivational speech.
They say a man doesn't know who he is until everything is taken from him. Not when he's winning, not when the crowd is cheering, not when the bank account is full, the house is warm, and the road ahead is paved in gold, but when he wakes up in the wreckage of a life that used to be his, when silence becomes his companion, when the phone stops ringing, when the world forgets his name. That is when a man meets himself. And that is exactly what happened to him. He wasn't always broken. Once he walked like he had purpose. He spoke with confidence, smiled like he owned the air he breathed. People admired him. He had what others envied: comfort, control, clarity. But life has a way of peeling back the layers we hide behind. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait until we're ready. It simply comes and it tests. It was one slow failure after another. A business deal that fell through. A friendship that dissolved in betrayal. A love he thought would last gone without warning. Doors slammed, bridges burned. And when it was all done, he stood alone in a quiet room, surrounded not by applause, but by the echo of his own disappointment. No money, no plan, no one. But here's the truth. No one tells you losing everything isn't the end. It's the beginning. Because in that moment of nothingness, when the world stopped spinning for him, something began to awaken, not outside, but within. For the first time in his life, he was no longer acting out a script written by someone else. He was free, not from pain, but from illusion. Free from the lie that success is what you own. Free from the weight of pretending. Free from the noise. And in that silence, he heard something, a whisper, a question that would change everything. Now that you have nothing, who will you choose to become? That one question shattered the old man inside him and planted a seed. And that seed would grow, not in sunshine, but in storms. Not in applause, but in solitude. Because he began to realize the most powerful force on earth is not talent, not luck, not intelligence. It is identity. What you believe you are determines everything you will ever become. And he had believed he was finished. But now he would choose a new belief, that he was being rebuilt, not broken, refined, not rejected, prepared, not punished, but redirected. Because purpose doesn't arrive when life is easy. Purpose is forged in fire, and he was in it now, not around it, not above it, inside the fire. But that is where gold is purified. That is where character is tested. That is where great men are born. So he stopped asking, why me, and started asking, what now? And slowly the ashes beneath his feet began to shift. He got up, no fanfare, no miracle, just a decision to stand, to move, to believe again, even when it hurt. He had nothing to prove to the world anymore. Now he had to prove something to himself, that he could rise, that he could rebuild not the life he lost, but the man he was meant to be. Because the truth is, most people never truly live. They drift, they follow, they mimic the dreams of others and wonder why they feel empty. But he had felt the sting of rock bottom, and now he understood when you've lost everything, you can finally choose anything. And he chose vision, he chose clarity, he chose to stop reacting and start creating. The world didn't need a replica of who he used to be. It needed the man he was becoming, the one who would rise with deeper roots, with quiet confidence, with no desire to impress, only to build. He began to read not to escape, but to equip. He wrote not for likes, but for legacy. He worked not to be seen, but to become. Every morning he rose before the sun, not because it was easy, but because discipline was the only bridge between the man he was and the man he was destined to be. He walked when no one watched. He sacrificed when no one clapped. He persisted when no one believed, because he knew the applause always comes after the work, not before. And when you stop chasing praise, you finally have the energy to chase your purpose. He began to understand that success was never about what he had. It was always about what he could give. And he gave everything: his time, his focus, his habits, his excuses. He buried them. Because the man who lost everything didn't just want a comeback. He wanted a rebirth. And he was willing to suffer for it, to bleed for it, to lose sleep, comfort, and comfort zones for it. Because once you've been to the bottom, fear loses its power. You've already seen how bad it can get. So what's left to fear judgment? He'd been judged. Failure, he'd already failed. Loneliness. He found strength in solitude. And now nothing could stop him. Not because the world changed, but because he did. He wasn't chasing money anymore. He was chasing meaning. He wasn't looking for shortcuts. He was building foundations. He didn't want attention. He wanted transformation. Because in the end, the only success that matters is the kind that changes you. Not your image, not your followers. You, the man you become in private, that's the man who wins in public. So every single day he planted seeds of growth, of discipline, of patience, and he stopped asking for harvest. He trusted the process. He let go of control and leaned into the only thing that truly builds greatness: consistency. Not talent, consistency, not emotion, commitment. And with every sunrise, the world began to notice. Not because he told them, because he showed them. Through his results, through his silence, through his persistence. And eventually the man who lost everything was unrecognizable. Not because he had rebuilt his house, not because he had restored his wealth, but because he had discovered a new foundation. One that could never be taken from him again. Because now he knew you don't truly find yourself until you're forced to face yourself. When all the masks fall, when the titles fade, when the world stops clapping, that's when you finally hear the voice that matters, your own. He no longer needed permission to rise. No one needed to believe in him. No one needed to understand him, because he had walked through the valley of darkness and he did not come out the same man who entered. He came out stripped of illusion, free from dependence and reborn in clarity. He wasn't trying to be perfect anymore. He was focused on being real, and the truth is real will always outlast perfect. Because real can bleed, real can break, real can bend and still return stronger. He stopped waiting for motivation to strike. He built routines so powerful motivation became irrelevant. He stopped chasing outcomes. He started loving the work, the sweat, the grind, the long nights and lonely mornings, because he finally understood something the world forgets. You don't rise by doing what's easy. You rise by doing what's necessary. He built discipline like a monument, not loud, not pretty, but unshakable. While others looked for hacks, he embraced the hard. While others hoped for breaks, he built habits. Because shortcuts might get you there faster, but they can't keep you there. Only one thing can hold you at the top: who you've become. And he was becoming the kind of man who couldn't be shaken by storms because he trained in them. He showed up in the rain. He worked when the path was unclear. He stayed focused when no one believed the vision but him. Because vision once ignited is not a luxury, it's a responsibility. And the man with vision becomes a force that cannot be stopped. Not by failure, not by fear, not even by time. The world around him hadn't changed. But he had changed so deeply that the world had no choice but to respond. He spoke less, but when he did, his words carried weight. He walked into rooms differently, not with arrogance, but with alignment. He knew who he was. He knew what he stood for. He knew where he was going. And that energy, it cannot be faked. It's not taught in classrooms. It's not found in textbooks. It's earned in the fire, in the silence, in the hours when no one is watching. He used to run from pain. Now he used pain as a compass. Where it hurt was where he leaned in. Where it scared him was where he walked toward. Where it challenged him was where he grew. Because every great transformation is born in the refusal to run. He faced it, all of it. The regret, the shame, the fear, the old version of himself that begged him to quit. He stared that man in the eye and said, "You are not in charge anymore." That version of him, the one who feared judgment, who doubted his worth, who believed he wasn't enough, that version died the day he decided to rise. He buried the excuses. He outlived the pain. He rewrote the story, not in words, but in action. And one day, quietly, without needing to announce it, he became free. Not just from poverty, not just from heartbreak, from himself, from the old patterns, from the small thinking, from the cage of other people's expectations. Because once you find yourself, truly find yourself, you can never go back to being lost. He didn't just rebuild a life. He reclaimed a legacy, not one of comfort, but one of conviction. Because everything he lost taught him this: the most dangerous man alive is the one who has nothing to lose and everything to give. He became that man, not because life handed him power, but because life took it all away, and he built it back with his bare hands. He no longer feared falling. He had already fallen. He no longer feared failing. He had already failed. And he no longer feared being alone, because in the solitude, he had met the only person who would never abandon him, the man in the mirror. And now he no longer waited for the world to crown him. He walked like a king, not because of what he wore or what he owned, but because of how he carried his scars. They were not signs of weakness. They were proof of survival, proof that the fire didn't destroy him, it refined him. And that's what life does. It doesn't give you what you ask for. It gives you what you need to become who you were born to be. He stopped chasing moments and started mastering momentum. Because real transformation isn't a lightning strike, it's a slow burn. It's a decision made again and again and again. Not when you feel like it, but when you don't. When it's dark, when you're tired, when the world feels like it's standing still and your efforts seem invisible. That's when it matters. That's where most men break. That's where he was built, because he finally understood the world doesn't reward potential, it rewards proof. And proof is born in repetition. So he moved with quiet certainty. He no longer sought validation. He sought mastery, mastery of his mind, his words, his time, his breath. He mastered the way he responded, not the way others treated him. Because power doesn't come from controlling the world, it comes from controlling yourself. He had once been a slave to his emotions, reactive, volatile, distracted. Now he was calm in the chaos, still in the storm. He had become the man others looked to when everything fell apart. Not because he was invincible, but because he had been broken and rebuilt, piece by piece, choice by choice, thought by thought. He realized that real strength isn't loud. It's not aggressive. It doesn't dominate. Real strength endures. It listens. It learns. It lasts. And through the process, he discovered a deeper truth. Success is not the destination. It's the refinement of your soul along the way. Each challenge, each rejection, each lonely night was not the universe punishing him. It was the universe preparing him. He learned to read the signs. He learned to let go of what no longer served him. Old habits, old beliefs, old relationships that drained rather than built. He released them all, not in anger, but in awareness, because he finally understood you cannot rise while holding on to what's pulling you down. And so he released, and as he let go, he rose, higher than before, not in status, not in fame, but in clarity. He became precise with his time. He didn't waste it on distractions, didn't water weeds and wonder why flowers didn't bloom. He guarded his energy. He protected his peace, because he knew that greatness doesn't grow in noise, it grows in focus. And every day as others scrolled, complained, or compared, he built in silence, brick by brick, mindset by mindset, until the life he once only dreamed of started to show up, not by magic, but by momentum, because effort, when repeated with intention, becomes inevitable impact. That's when the world began to notice again. But this time, he didn't need the recognition. He respected himself. He no longer chased applause because he walked in alignment. And alignment creates peace far greater than praise. He had become the kind of man who could be trusted with success, not because he sought it, but because he earned it. And that's when the irony revealed itself. He didn't need everything back, because what he found inside himself was worth more than everything he had lost. And it showed in the way he walked, in the way he treated people, in the way he looked at life, not with entitlement, but with gratitude. Because when you've had nothing, everything becomes a gift. The breath, the sunrise, the grind, the growth. He no longer measured success in dollars. He measured it in discipline, in how consistently he kept his word to others and to himself. He measured it in courage to speak the truth when it cost him something. He measured it in impact, not in how many people knew his name, but how many lives were better because he never quit. He had learned the sacred rhythm of becoming, and now he moved with presence. He no longer rushed. He trusted. He knew that what was meant for him would come not through force, but through faith and effort. Because faith without effort is fantasy, and effort without faith is exhaustion. But when the two meet, when belief and grind walk hand in hand, You unlock something most never will: peace in pursuit, joy in the journey, and power in the process. And that's what he had now. Not perfection, but peace. Not absence of struggle, but the strength to keep walking through it. He didn't fear storms anymore. He became the storm. He didn't wait for opportunity, he created it. Because the man who had once lost everything had discovered the one thing that makes a man truly unstoppable: purpose. And once you live from that, nothing can shake you. You become bulletproof in spirit, unshakable in vision, and dangerous to the systems of mediocrity that keep most people small. He lost everything, but he found himself. And in doing so, he gained everything that mattered.